Research shows that taxes can reduce inequality, but they cannot solve the problem. A progressive tax system where the wealthy pay a higher rate than the poor, it does reduce the gap somewhat between the rich and poor on an after-tax basis. That's not really rocket science. In the U.S., however, the tax system has become more progressive over the years, but inequality has grown. Taxes can also help reduce inequality by raising revenue for public investment when it's well spent in education and infrastructure. So why not just crank up the taxes on the wealthy to solve inequality? Well, not so fast. The OECD observes that the effects of taxation on income distribution need to be seen in context of the trade-offs between growth and equity. High marginal tax rates on income can act as a disincentive, for instance, for investment in human capital or discourage entrepreneurship. Economists think there are ways to tax some wealth that do not distort growth. For example, in places where salaries or incomes are determined more by monopoly factors than market factors. Research is mixed, by the way, on whether CEO salaries can be one of those areas. But overall, wealth taxes are viewed pretty negatively because of how they distort incentives and growth. One suggestion has a lot of support. Not sure why nobody's really talking about this. What happened to reducing loopholes that exempt or reduce taxes for the wealthiest or whole industries? The economic cost of those taxes are seen as minimal and even positive if they reduce distortions. Thank you, Becky.
Why have we not talked about that more? The idea that you have to rewrite everything and create these new taxes when you could just fix the loopholes in the existing system and probably be much more effective, raise more money without disrupting growth.
I want to know what happened to conservatives on both sides, right? I mean, you completely did away with tax reform in the corporate tax cuts, and you don't have any of the, very few of the Democrats talking about just tax reform. I mean, there are whole industries in America that don't pay any taxes. Those are distortionary. You could raise some revenue there, reduce economic distortions. And, of course, the concept, when you reduce economic distortions, you get more bang for the buck. You get more growth than you would otherwise get if you reduce distortions.
On the other hand, a lot of times when people are, it seems, talking about income inequality, they're talking about stagnant incomes for the average household, right? I mean, yes, of course, you don't want necessarily a huge split.
Incomes have been climbing, though.
Yeah.
Well, they've been climbing after a long time of being sideways. Yeah,
that's right. But it's a little bit more than that, Michael, in the sense that income inequality is seen as something that is bad for growth.
Yes.
Bad for a democracy, bad for the economy. So you want to reduce it, but you do not want to reduce it at the expense of reducing growth itself.
You don't want to bring everybody down to a lower level.
You're right. The idea is try to lift everybody up. Yeah. So you need to look at the economy and find, if you go from the overall concept that a rising tide lifts all boats, why do some boats go up higher than other boats, and why do some boats not come up?
I mean, look at, if you're invested in equities, you've done better since the Great Recession than if you haven't been.
That's right. But are there rents out there? Are there places where people are getting beyond which the market would otherwise give them? Things like in urban areas, land in urban areas. Things like the real estate development industry overall, by the way, is a heavily undertaxed industry. And there are places where CEO salaries. Here's one of the interesting things about Bernie Sanders' wealth tax on salaries. In some cases, you can imagine that the CEO salaries are not really set by the market. Okay? So you could tax that, and it would not necessarily be negative for growth if you could find those places where they're not. However,
good luck.
Right, okay. All right, but let's just the theoretical framework. If reducing CEO salaries will not raise the janitor's salary because one doesn't necessarily arbitrage the other. There may be more money around if you pay your CEO less, but you wouldn't pay the janitor more if the supply of labor for the janitor position is not higher or lower.
What about a new higher level of income tax added on to the top? Because if you're just taxing people more over $1 million, that doesn't really hurt the economy, does it? Because it's not like they were spending all of that money straight away that year. It just reduces perhaps how much they're able to save for the long term.
So, Wolf, you've done a great job at pegging the great unknown. There is almost certainly a Laffer curve out there. There's almost certainly a place where you reduce the incentive for work if you raise taxes. The trouble is we don't really know at any one moment where we are on that Laffer curve. And what you can do is you can kind of grope your way in the dark here. You can feel your way in the dark and say, okay, if I go up a bit on this, what happens here? You know, there's a lot of talk about raising the taxes from the Obama era would destroy growth. It didn't destroy growth. And by the way, the lowering the corporate taxes has not created a massive amount of incentive to invest. We may not have been at a critical point on the Laffer curve when it came to capital investment.